So I want to tell you the origin story of how I came to invent a compass that points to a spot that you pick. So the first version of this compass actually looked like this, much bigger. And you can see there's a ring of LED lights. And actually, it's kind of hard to see in the sunshine here, but as you spin it, the white light actually tells you the direction to your destination. So inside, you can see all the guts in this one really nicely, but there's the rectangular chip is the Arduino Nano that controls the thing. The blinking chip over there, the green blinking chip, is the GPS chip connected to the silver antenna. The silver antenna's over here, yeah. And then right at the dead center, there's a digital compass as well. And I first made this as part of a mystery that I wrote for my niece and nephew. So they were coming up to stay with my parents at a state park near us, Moraine State Park. Great park. And I wanted to write a mystery for them while they were there to solve. And so I wrote this elaborate mystery. It was called The Mystery of the Dutchman's Rubies. And it was how this coal miner that had been there before the lake was filled in, he found a geologically improbable seam of rare gemstones beneath the ground. And then he delved too greedily and actually was drowned whenever they filled in the lake. But before he was drowned, he was able to put some of those diamonds, gems, in a cache, and then also write a riddle that would point to them just in case he didn't make it back out of his mine. And so I then explained how this riddle had been passed down through a series of events to my father. And he then gave it to Evie and Ethan and explained that they had to solve this mystery to try to find the Dutchman's rubies. So they had to solve the riddle, and then they had to put together a jigsaw puzzle with a message on the back. And the final step was I gave them this compass and said, let's figure out where this points. This is where the cache is hidden. The riddle points us here. And so the night before, I'd hiked out to this abandoned water tower in the state park. And it's pretty easy to get to it from the back. There's a road that you can't really see from the aerial footage, but there's a road that goes back to a couple hundred yards away. So my mom and my brother and I, we hiked out to the base of this abandoned water tower, and I planted the treasure at the end. And I scouted a little bit just down the edge of the hill to make sure that the terrain we were going to be covering the next day wasn't too rough. And it didn't look like it at the time. So we headed back, and the next morning we set out. And now the destination we were heading to, this abandoned water tower, which they could see on a map, was across the lake. And so we had to take my dad's sailboat to get there, but the sailboat had too deep a draft to actually get up to the shore. So we put everybody in a canoe, and we towed the canoe behind the sailboat and got out to this spot. And then we rowed out, and we untied the rope, and we rowed out, and we got onto the shore. And immediately I realized my mistake because it may have looked clear from the top of the hill, but from the bottom, the hill was completely covered in briar bushes. In Western Pennsylvania, we call them jagger bushes. There were jaggers everywhere, and I mean jaggers the size of your finger that would just rip into your clothes. So my niece and my nephew, it was impassable to them, utterly impassable. I mean, the jaggers were all eye height for them, right? But I was committed, right? We were in the middle of this glorious adventure. It was so much fun already. We were going to see it through. So my brother and I, we threw my niece and my nephew on our shoulders, and we hiked over the most godforsaken ground you can imagine. Briars everywhere, mud, uneven footing, carrying kids on our shoulders. And my niece on our shoulders, she was holding the compass, and she's saying, that way. Hurry up, we're trying. So eventually we made it up to just by the water tower, and there it did finally clear up. There were no more briars, and it became like classic state park land, right? And it was just tall trees and not a lot of underbrush, ferns mostly. They got off our shoulders and they followed the compass to the base of the tower where this glass jar filled with gemstones I'd hidden was, glass gems. And they were so excited. My niece was like, these are worth $1 million. I'm gonna buy a sports car. Oh, it was so fun. It was a glorious day. Of course, then we had to hike back down the hill. And my brother the whole time was complaining so badly. He's such a spoil sport. He's like, I'm going to get poison ivy. Look at these jaggers. This is terrible. I'm ruining my pants. I got to go drive 8 hours back to Philly after this. It's like, dude, we're in the middle of a glorious adventure. Come on, feel the joy here. Come on. How many times do we collect a life tile that says solve a mystery at a state park and find a treasure? He would probably tell this story very differently than I do, I would imagine. But eventually we made it back down to the canoe. Not before a jagger the size of his head almost tore off my nephew's eye. He got a pretty nasty gash, but he was fine. And thank goodness it was right near the end. So we were back in the canoes. He was fine, he just needed a Band-Aid. We rode back out to the sailboat where my dad was waiting to us. We powered back in, and we took stock, counted our treasures. It was great. It was a perfect day. Now, after that happened, the compass just kind of sat on a shelf for 2 years after that. I mean, I knew it was a cool invention, but I just couldn't see how it had any sort of broad market appeal, you know. It was expensive for a thing for kids, really, was the problem. And then one day I had this realization that you might get this and have it point to the spot where you got engaged. And the bit flip here for me, the thing that finally made me see that it was a viable product, was that it isn't really about making new adventures, although it certainly works for that. It's really about celebrating the adventures you've already had. And so making this beautiful version, you know, with the nice maple base, solid brass ring, and these physical hands that rotate around and tell you the distance and how far away you are. You know, the other one didn't really have the distance, which is really helpful for navigating. I feel like that was really the key to, you know, help me see how this thing that I'd made for my niece and nephew was actually could be a broad market thing that everybody could really like, because it would help them celebrate their connection to a place. Anyways, that's the story of how the Truest North Compass first came into existence. Although at the time, when I made it for my niece and nephew, I was calling it the Rumpus Compass, which in some ways I think is the better name. I mean, Truest North Compass is a lovely name and much more hallmarky, you know. I think it makes sense. You wouldn't really want to get your fiance a Rumpus Compass per se, but a Truest North Compass, maybe. So anyways, that's the story. Thanks for listening to it.